question the value, from a cost-benefit approach of graduate and postgraduate degrees. With higher ed costs and postgraduate costs easily exceeding 30, 40s, now sometimes $50,000 a year in the mountain of student debt that graduates face upon graduation, upon graduation that we talked about. How do we improve the affordability and therefore access to higher education? I'll start with this.
Sure. Well, Matt, I think that ties into exactly what I was talking about in terms of this higher education affordability work that we did this year. It's about using all the resources we have. I reject the idea that we're going to build a 21st century economy without a strong education system and that without people getting more and more education. Just have to look around at the technological changes and the equipment that everybody has in their pocket to know we're going to need a well-educated workforce to compete. And we see that with what's growing here in our communities. It's the Global Foundries project down in Saratoga. It's companies like Delcath right here in the North Country that are expanding with next generation technology. For people to have good jobs here in America, we're not going to compete with the Vietnamese or the Bangladeshis for $1 a day labor. We're going to have an educated workforce. And we've got a good education system here in New York. Got good public schools and good higher education. But we need some help for our middle class families to be able to afford it. And that's why I thought it was the right thing to do to take $80 billion from subsidies to banks and give it to Pell Grants and loan reductions in terms of reducing the interest rates that people are going to face and making community college more affordable as a first step for people. And we're seeing the impact of that on our colleges right now. So it's about investing in and making sure that our educational infrastructure is available and there and competitive all over the world. One of the great assets of upstate New York. My past life as an investor building businesses, people often didn't know this. Upstate New York has a plethora of independent colleges. And in fact, we have more patents here in upstate New York than they do in Massachusetts. You hear about all this Boston technology, but upstate New York is a hub of research and intellectual property because we've got such a great education system. Making it affordable is about loans and grants and holding down those costs by investing in some public education options that compete out there in the marketplace with the private ones. That's what our community colleges and our SUNY colleges do.
Well, let me start by saying, yes, indeed, there is a stark contrast. I believe that the solutions to the problems we're in right now are better solved right here. I don't think Washington, D.C. has the answers. In fact, time and time again, we've been brokenhearted, and we end up broken for paying for what these government takeovers. So I disagree with regard to how to approach student loan industry. I think it's better held in the private sector. And I also want to note that my opponent had nothing to say with regard to relief for the many young professionals out here that are stuck with high APRs with regard to no refinanceability. And I disagree with that. I think that we should change that regulation, and let's have that noted. With regard to public schools, I'm a strong supporter. I'm a product of public schools myself. We have 3 children that are involved. Go to Ichabod Crane. We're strong supporters. We're involved. We think we have fantastic teachers right in the 20th district, and certainly in our school district and beyond. But when it comes to what we can do for our schools, what I think we ought to do is take a look at the areas where we have shortages. Take, for example, doctors and healthcare professionals, and we ought to try to incentivize that with regard to our monies that we're using from the federal treasury for education. And then beyond that, how we can also help is to grow our economy. Because nothing worse than going through 4 years of college and getting on the back side of it and having a good deal of money you owe in loans and having no job prospects. And that's wrong. Right here we're sitting close to 10% unemployment, 9.5% unemployment right now, really with no foreseeable relief in the future. And so what we need to do, I think, is remove impediments to growth and targeted tax and regulatory relief and repeal and replace the health care bill, because those are the areas those are the specific areas that stand in the way of the growth of the companies. And many of the companies' leaders here in the Glens Falls area represented right here in this room. Thank you.
You both in your answers touched on something that certainly has been in the news this year, and that's healthcare. So we'll take that question up. Many Americans, including many of the young professionals in this room, struggle with the high cost of healthcare, costs which continue to increase on an annual basis. How will the healthcare bill enacted this year make healthcare more affordable and therefore more attainable for not only young professionals, but all Americans seeking affordable healthcare? We'll start with.
Sure. The healthcare bill is a response to something that I think all of us as business people know, and I sure know this about the businesses I built here in New York, that our healthcare system has been broken. That for too long, the costs have been spiraling out of control, and insurance companies held too much of the power in terms of deciding what you could and couldn't do, and individuals and the doctors weren't getting to control those choices. And as we had this healthcare debate in the last year, I traveled all over this district. Matt referenced earlier, I think I did 150 town hall meetings. Most of them were about healthcare. And that's what I heard from people all over this district. There was agreement on the problem, some disagreement on the solutions, and that's for sure. What I think we did with this healthcare bill is put in place a system that is going to start to get those costs under control over time with exchanges, just like the one the Adirondack Regional Chamber of Commerce runs for small businesses to come together and get buying power against large insurance companies. And with tax credits for small businesses to get to invest in the healthcare system and to get money if they invest in making healthcare available to their employees. This is another topic where my opponent and I have strong disagreements. He has been strongly in favor of repealing the healthcare bill. I'm sure we'll hear from him about that in a second. And I think that that's the wrong way to go forward. There was agreement that we had problems to solve. Repealing the bill now will undo the things that have already been done and the things that are going to be done in the future. If you repeal the bill now, you take away the ability for families to keep their kids while they're in college on their healthcare plan. He wants to do that. If you take it away, you take away the help for our seniors that would get help with their prescription drug plan. He wants to do that. You get rid of the limit on lifetime insurance caps, annual and lifetime insurance caps that mean your insurance goes away if you get sick. He wants to do that. It means that you get rid of those tax credits for small businesses that are helpful to getting insurance. That's in the bill. He wants to do that. I think that the right plan is to improve it, to continue to work on our healthcare system as we would be doing and will be doing forever. One of the areas where we do agree is on tort reform. I'm a strong supporter of that. Was one of the few Democrats to vote for it in the legislation in the Congress. That's one of the things we can do to improve it, but we don't have to go back to a broken system and throw out all the good things that we've already done just to solve the problems that we can continue to work on over time. Thank you.
Well, this is 1/6 of our economy, and essentially we're moving it to the public sector. It's a big mistake, in my view. And where else but the Congress are you going to believe something like we're going to add 40 million people to the rolls and we're going to reduce costs? I mean, who believes something like that? It's just not going to happen. And in fact, you look at the chief actuary for the administration on this particular area and discuss the fact that this is going to raise costs by $300 billion if the bill was not more with this bill than if we didn't have the bill. And you look at the CBO, and I will tell you that ever since the initial report, they've been backtracking because they realize the fact that given the parameters on how they scored this bill, this is going to be a big deficit buster. We double counted some of the savings in terms of Medicare and new entitlement. There's a 22% cut to doctors in that bill, when in fact doctors haven't had a raise since 1996. Who believes that we're really going to cut doctors by 22%? A big mistake if we do. But when we fix that, that's going to be a huge deficit buster. We're going to see our premiums rise as a consequence of this. There's 24 new taxes. Listen, one of the new taxes is a 3.8% increase in like real estate sales, real estate taxes. So how many of our elderly, as they get on in years, decide to sell their home and to either move in with family or move into to some kind of nursing home? And how many donor health checks is it going to take to make up for that? This is not a good bill when you look at the impacts on premiums, when you look at the increase in taxes, regulations. One that's come up recently is the 1099, but this is one of thousands of new owners regulations that are going to crush our small businesses here, not to mention big government. At a time we need to be reducing the size of the federal government, we're creating a couple dozen new panels and commissions and perhaps as many as 16,500 IRS workers to enforce this thing. They have nothing to do with your health care. This is absolutely a big mistake. And the thing that's going to get undone is our economy if we don't fix it. Now, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, we clearly need health care reform. What we need to do is repeal this bill, and we need to replace it with one that's imbued with free market forces, that looks towards competition across state lines, more transparency so we know what we're paying for instead of getting the summary benefits. And we need the tort reform, and my opponent and I agree on this. But listen, when we do the replacement bill, there's a lot of pieces in this that can go into that, including catastrophic coverage and making sure that we don't drop coverage when somebody gets sick. And we know in New York State that's largely not an issue now. So listen, we got to focus on this fact because everywhere I go, this bill is widely unpopular. And we have small business owners that fear for their very existence because of this bill. And this bill, my opponent was on the right side of it the first time. And then he flipped after meeting with Speaker Pelosi and President Obama. And you know, Scott, you had it right the first time, and you should have stuck with it. Okay.
Thanks. Something you both touched on in your answer, making this easy for monitoring, property taxes. Is you both know, government's ability to pay for services has its genesis in the end in taxation. In New York, as you know, we're burdened with some of the highest real property taxes in the nation. Where are areas of opportunity that you believe that Congress can help alleviate local real property tax burdens? And if elected, how would you pursue those relief opportunities? And Mr. Gibson, I'll start with you.
Yeah, well, first of all, let's recognize that taxes across the board are particularly onerous. We lead in all the wrong categories, and when you add up federal, state, and local, including property taxes, you see that we have, in some cases, rates that exceed 63%. This is clearly a job killer. And so what we need to do, I believe, is cut the size of the federal government so we can get tax relief at the federal level, and we can push programs back down to the states. States can right-size programs, because what's going on in terms of our property taxes is they're at the tail end of what I think is too much spending at the federal, the state, and the local level. And then here in New York State, you look at Medicaid costs. I mean, that's where a lot of our property taxes are. We've got a new mandate coming forward in the health care bill, and what we've got to do, I think we've got to make a strong stand. Obviously, it's not a federal issue, but what I'm advocating for is property tax caps. Property tax caps are not going to solve our problems, but it's going to force a constitutional issue right here in New York so we can get control of our spending. There have been states that have done this, even in nearby in Massachusetts, and it's actually helped get a hold of state spending.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. This is a critical issue. You know, I travel around in this district from up in Lake Placid to down in Sydney in the corner of Delaware County, and it's the same everywhere we go. Property taxes are killing us here in upstate New York. They are too high, and they've been getting higher every year, and we struggle with that. It's tied to real estate values, and there's just not a lot of growth in these areas, and the taxes just keep going up. So this is a critical issue for everyone. So I've looked at anything I could do from Congress to try to help on this front. One thing that we've done is I've helped support legislation to allow you, even if you don't itemize, to deduct your property taxes from your federal tax bill so that you can get a little relief from that. I think it's critical. The stimulus package, which actually provided a lot of money to our local schools, really helped to keep property taxes from getting even worse the last 2 years. This is an area where there was a real disagreement between my opponent and myself. He thinks that was a giveaway and a waste of money. I think money for our local schools is really important. Just recently at a federal level, we provided some additional relief for next year and the year after that for our local schools. This is a bill that's been somewhat controversial. He and I disagree on this as well. I supported this money that was going to go to our local schools. It was fully paid for, so it didn't add to the deficit. That was something I fought for, because as a fiscal conservative, that's important. How did we pay for it? We changed another piece of legislation that we needed to get done. We changed a foreign tax loophole that was set up so that corporations, sitting here, American corporations like General Electric, other companies that are international, if they were to invest overseas, they got a tax benefit instead of investing here. It's a crazy setup. It's a foreign tax loophole so that you could get a better deal if you invested overseas. I was at CR Bar just recently, and they told me, we compete with sister factories all over the world, and we're at a 40% disadvantage here because of the tax code that says it's better to build stuff overseas than it is here. That's just wrong. Everyone in this room knows we need to encourage business here in upstate New York. We need to incentivize companies to invest here. That's why I fought for this change, so that there wouldn't be this foreign tax loophole. My opponent disagreed. He opposed the bill. In fact, he's been out campaigning saying it was a gimmick, the idea of using foreign tax loopholes to pay for education funding to hold the line on property taxes. That's exactly what I'll continue doing if you send me to Congress, because that's what I think we need to fight our property taxes and encourage jobs to be here locally.
Thank you.